Good evening and welcome everyone to our Business 493 Leadership and Followership, our fall 2024 semester. As I mentioned in my announcement, my apologies on having a work conflict for class the night of September 24th. I'm going to be at a conference and it's going to run into the evening. We thought we might be done by 5 or 5:30, but it does look like it is going to go well into the evening. So I wanted to make sure to get an announcement out to all of you and provide all of you with an additional opportunity to engage on this week's topics. So I'm putting together a short video here where I talk about the things that follows along with the slideshow that is in the weekly content. One thing about this, leadership, it talks about the courage to serve, right? And to serve other people. And certainly we talk about servant leadership, and we can dive into that more as our semester goes along. But followership is service. It's service to your leader. And I ran across something as I was preparing for class and also chatting with some colleagues and peers and different people through some industries about this topic of leadership, which we're, of course, studying all semester. And I came across this quote that I just thought was absolutely wonderful. And I've heard it in different ways and different sentiments and expressed in different manners, throughout the last 10 to 15 years. But Joseph Grenny, who co-founded Crucial Learning, was at one time known as Vital Smarts. He's one of the key authors and one of the social scientists who put together Crucial Conversations. And what he says is one of the greatest challenges of leadership is being okay with people not being okay with you. Right? And Patrick Lencioni, Simon Sinek, they'll all tell you that leadership is not a popularity contest. There are going to be days where you are the least popular person out there. So that, that first sentence is so much about the essence of leadership, right? One of the greatest challenges of leadership is being okay with people not being okay with you. This can require greater emotional maturity and independence than we sometimes have. These are strengths that are developed by these very demands, not summoned in advance. So it's very tough to develop that, right? So when we have to make a decision that's maybe not popular, it's maybe not liked, maybe it's a tough decision, maybe it's a decision based on a hiring decision or a strategic decision, or to choose one project over another, or to fund one project over another, right? Maybe we're in that situation where we need to use the, kind of the coercive or disciplinary aspect of leadership, right? We're not going to win a popularity contest on those days. And we can do all the things and read all the leadership books and take all the leadership classes we want, but till we're in that moment, right, that's when we're going to find out the strength and courage that we have. And I often say, right, when you're in that moment and it feels icky and you need to stick to your values and stick to what you believe in, and you really need to lean into those things, you have to remember, right, A, the moment is not too big for me. B, I was put in this moment for a reason. And C, I'm going to summon all my experiences, all my courage, all my strength, all the opinions I get from other people can even play into that. And I'm going to move forward in a way that's productive and supportive of us being the best we can be. So one thing we have to determine when we're serving our leaders is, when is it okay to speak for our leaders? Because we can't take everything to them. There are times where we need to make decisions. We need to represent the organization. We need to represent the values, the strategy, the mission, and vision of our leaders. So when is it okay to speak for them? Do you know? Have your leaders talked to you and said, hey, in these situations, and it should be the exception. This should be the short list of 2 or 3 things. In these 2 or 3 things, make sure you always consult with me before speaking on my behalf or speaking on the organization's behalf. Any other time, you're free to do what you need to do to execute your job. That's the way it should look. There should be a short list of exceptions that your leaders say, anytime this is the case, or this is the scenario, make sure you consult with me before you speak on behalf of myself or the organization, right? So those are great conversations to have with our leaders, right? And we should know that, right? And certainly anytime I think we're speaking publicly for the organization, anytime there's anything controversial or scandalous, right? Anytime the reputation of the organization is being called into question, I think that those are some key things that we should consider, whether we speak for our leaders or we consult with them before speaking, or perhaps even let them do the talking for us. So I think, I've talked a little bit this semester. We need to avoid those either or scenarios, right? Either it's all A or it's all B, but it can't be both A and B, and it certainly can't be an alternative route like a C, a D, or an E. And maybe there are great alternative solutions and successful paths forward like a C, D, and E. But success in organizations is dependent upon brilliant leadership and brilliant support. And you notice that it's brilliant leadership and brilliant support, right? Brilliant leadership doesn't happen by itself. It happens because of brilliant support. And brilliant support, courageous followers cannot exist without brilliant or great leadership, right? So they're codependent upon one another, and it's not brilliant leadership or brilliant support, it's brilliant leadership and brilliant support. So reflect on that for a second. Reflect on that, right? It's both. And how do we get to both, right? It's very important. Courageous followership requires us to assume additional responsibilities to lessen our leader's burden, right? And, right, to have the conversation that assists the leader in seeing their part in creating work overload, right? So it's that duality of comfort and confront. One of our goals or one of our responsibilities as a courageous follower is to help our leaders be successful. We need to serve our leaders. And one of the greatest things we can do is contribute to their success. Their success is our success, is the organization's success, right? But there's a duality of it. There's times where if we think our leaders are going down a bad path, perhaps we should share that with them, right? Or say something to them and let them know. So a key consideration, right? What activities are central to a leader's role, right? What things are central to their role, right? That should not be delegated and that should better be supported, right? Things that they should not be delegating. What are key things that you need from your leader or your organization needs from your leader that they probably shouldn't delegate, but we should figure out how to support them and how to support them and our leaders being successful. Our text talked on something this week, which I thought was, it brought it up and it mentioned the word once or twice, micromanaged or micromanagement, right? And I've always said to people, if you feel like you're being micromanaged, you are, okay? And that's not saying you're good or bad. That's not saying your leader's good or bad. However, when you're being micromanaged, it's an indication of a lack of trust, a breakdown of trust, a breakdown of communication, right? Micromanagement is one of those times, if you feel it, you should be like, I feel it. And it's probably true, but that doesn't make you a bad follower and that doesn't make your leader a bad leader. Just means there needs to be some clarification. There's something causing the need for the manager to feel like they need to be micromanaged. So whether it's their perception that the leader has or it's the perception that you've created of yourself, and it's probably a little of both, right? It's probably a little of both. You need to clear that up, right? So it's a breakdown in trust, a breakdown in communication needs to be addressed so you and your leader can successfully move forward. And it's certainly, that concept of micromanagement ties into this next concept. The most important processes and organizational structures are centered around communication, right? That's a pretty strong assertion from our author, right? I mean, we have tons of processes, standard operating procedures, organizational structures are vast, they're varied, they're diverse. There's tons of different ways to structure an organization, right? And there's not one right way to structure an organization. There's probably one or two better ways based on the strategy you're trying to implement. Let me repeat that. There's not one right way to structure an organization. There's probably one or two better ways based on the strategy you're trying to execute or implement. But the most important processes and structures are centered around communication, right? When communication breaks down, that impacts trust, that impacts the ability to execute, that impacts clarity, right? That impacts purpose. We might get confusion over mission and vision. Those are all important, necessary things to move forward in our organization to make sure everyone's best talents are being used. So it's a pretty strong assertion, but it's an assertion that it's difficult to argue with, right? That some of the most important processes, or our author says the most important processes in organizational structures are centered around communication and whether it's effectively occurring or not effectively communication. And certainly your processes and certainly your organizational structure can impede effective communication, right? Also, when you think about effective communication, we need to think about, the use of technology and the modality by which we communicate, right? If you need to just pick up the phone and call somebody, you need to pick up the phone and call somebody. You might think, oh my gosh, making an actual phone call nowadays, right? A text might not be working, an email might not be working, an instant message might not be working, a Teams message might not be working, right? Some sort of virtual meeting might not be working, right? Maybe we just need to pick up the phone and call somebody, or perhaps walk down the hall into their office and say, hey, do you have a minute we can talk? Can I sit down, right? Maybe in a lot of instances, a text is good enough, but when those exceptions require a deeper, richer communication modality, we need to be okay with embracing it, right? When we choose the wrong modality of communication, a lot of times that can be just as critical as saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, right? Because the modality choice can create misperception where there doesn't need to be. Right? And sometimes, right, as courageous followers, we need to clarify our leaders' messages, right? Either in content or because of modality choice. Sometimes we need to ask for clarification. Sometimes we need to ask them to clarify to the larger group. Sometimes maybe we're being asked to communicate something on behalf of our leaders, and we need to make sure we clearly understand what we're communicating on their behalf. That's probably one of the most critical things, right? If they're communicating and we ask them to clarify for the benefit of all of the good, that may be one thing. But if we need to communicate on behalf of our leaders, we need to be crystal clear on what they want us to communicate, right? And I asked the question, time spent with our leaders, right? Our leaders a lot of times pour a lot of energy into us. They need us to be successful, right? Based on what we might believe at times, they want us to be successful, right? So how do we maximize the value of time spent with your leaders, right? If you get coaching from your leaders, if you get tips from your leaders of how to maybe communicate something, how to effectively lead your people, how to problem solve, how to work through a roadblock, right? One of the best things you can do is say, hey, we met last week for 5 minutes or 25 minutes and you shared 3 tips with me on priority management or how to communicate more effectively with my team or how to share a message of a process we're going to change or a structure we're going to change. I wanted to share with you how that went, right? So come back and let your leader know that the time they have invested in you has been valuable and let them know what the results were. They may provide some additional coaching. They may learn some things about their own coaching that's really effective. Maybe things are not so effective, right? But anytime your leader invests time in you, let them know the value they created. Let them know the impact that had on you, right? Especially the positive impact. But if there's things that you're still struggling with, don't hesitate to ask really good follow-up questions. Our text talked about the active gatekeeping, right? This can be important, right? And we need to be careful, right? If we're the person that everyone goes to get to our boss, if we're kind of that person, right? That power of proximity to power is itself intoxicating and it can inflate egos, right? It's very, very critical and very, very important, right? We have to take that power, that active gatekeeping. We need to remain humble. Sometimes you can joke about it, like, hey, if you want to talk so-and-so, come to me. That's great, right? But we need to be humble about it. We need to be sincere and genuine. But that power, the power of proximity, right? Or the proximity to power, the power involved with being close to the leader, being close to the decision maker, being a trusted confidant of that decision maker, right? We need to respect that trust, and we need to respect the trust of other followers as well. So, we think about, how do we not add to the pressures and piles of communication received by your leaders, right? Sometimes we need to buffer things, right? What do we actually know versus what have we heard, right? What have we actually witnessed based on what's secondhand? And can we separate that for our leaders, right? Like, hey, I've heard this or I'm hearing rumblings of this, right? Whereas I actually saw this, I was actually a part of this conversation, right? Helping separate some of that out where our leaders might need to know that they need to ask additional follow-up questions, that they need to dig deeper, right? That buffering. What do we actually know versus what have we heard, right? Well, I heard so-and-so did this. That's different than I saw this person do this or I was involved in a conversation where this was said, right? Secondhand, third-hand knowledge, sometimes it's valuable. More often than not, it can be inaccurate, a little embellished upon. Maybe there's bits and pieces that are fact, and then there's bits and pieces that are fiction, right? Do we want to waste our time as leaders with some of that unnecessary drama? Probably not, right? Summoning up the courage to talk to our leaders. I thought this was great advice. We should use the discrepancy between publicly held values and personal behavior as feedback to help a leader re-examine their values and behavior, right? So what that might mean is if your leader asks, hey, do you need anything from me? You can say, hey, I need to understand something. Right? We talk about transparency, or we talk about high ethics, or we talk about team first, or we talk about creating maximum value for our customers. Okay, I hear all those things and I agree with them, and they're why I love working here and they're why I love working for you. But then I hear these words being said at a company town hall, or I see a memo come out that says this. Help me merge that gap because I'm seeing a difference there, right? That can be really powerful, right? Really powerful. And you got to be smart. You got to know that that's welcome in your organization. But if you have that kind of relationship with your leader, right, we avoid creating that image of that infallible leader, and we help those leaders become the best versions of themselves, right? Again, this week it talks about the power of relationships, right? So leader to follower, right? We need leaders and followers to be connected. They get multiple perspectives. They don't always go to the same people that agree with them, right? They get different perspectives on how the team is doing, how the organization is doing, and how we're executing, right? And then peer to peer, right? We need to also connect our leaders to other leaders. And we ourselves need to connect to other people, right? It broadens our perspective. It gets diverse, multiple opinions into the decision-making process. More importantly, even the diverse perspectives and multiple inputs of perspectives into the decision-making process, just even into our thought processes. Sometimes that can be more important, right? As we go back and we kind of start sorting through things and thinking things before we're even at the point of making a decision. Just having those different perspectives to consider, right, is critical and very important to what we do. So following during a crisis, right? We've talked a little about crisis management, why it's important, right? We want to have a plan ahead of time, right? Our plan should reaffirm our purpose as an organization or a team, right? And then afterwards, self-reflection. How do we improve going forward, right? So having a plan ahead of time gives us all a baseline, right? Some common terminology, some common actions we're going to take, helps us to reaffirm our purpose as an organization. And then there's some self-reflection after that crisis is over, right? What does this look like going forward, right? Creating a healthy relationship with our leaders directly, right? We don't want to be too eager to please, right? We talked about being overly diplomatic, right? If we overemphasize being diplomatic and eager to please, it becomes capitulation. It becomes appeasement of maybe some bad things, right? We also need to be authentic and genuine, right? Those are some things that could be a problem. So as our author says, service to others is an art that takes both commitment and discipline. We need to be disciplined and understand who we are. This comes back to understanding who we are, so what we do aligns with it, right? That who versus what. Who I am defines what I do, right? So we can be disciplined when we understand who we are as an individual and who we need to be as an organization team. Individual, team, very closely tied together, right? And then takes commitment. We need to be deliberate. We need to review those. We need to talk about our values, right? When we compliment someone or reward someone, hey, that was a great demonstration of our value of excellence, or a great demonstration of service, or a great demonstration of leadership or followership, right? When we compliment other people, remind them of the values that they embrace, the values that they're putting forth for other people, right? That they're putting into example every single day. And it takes discipline, but we need to know who we are as an individual, who our values are, and what our values are as an organization. So I would encourage all of you, right, as we've taken a look at some of these, reflect back. Some of the questions that I asked, maybe go back and reflect upon a few of them. And think for yourself, take several minutes, maybe 3 or 5 minutes here as you're done watching this video. What elements of leadership or followership have you experienced in this past week or even in the past couple weeks, right? Could be good or bad examples. Hopefully we can focus on some positive examples, but sometimes we learn from where we slip up in leadership and followership, and those can be informative as well. So I would encourage all of you, take a minute or two, a couple minutes, and reflect upon elements of leadership or followership you have experienced this week. Maybe reflect upon a few of the questions that I've thrown out there. Thank you all in advance. I thank you all in advance for your understanding. We'll be back together in the following week. Like I said, I had a work conflict to try to minimize those during the semester. We'll move together in a successful way throughout the rest of the semester. Thank you so much. And as always, if you have questions, do not hesitate to ask. Thank you.